So I just wanted to show you my solution to the problem that I gave you in the previous video, which was, if you recall, so here on the DICOM file in, I have 30 files in here. Half are for one study and half are for a different study. Also, about half of them are JPEG 2000 and the other half are JPEG. So they're different transfer syntaxes and different studies. And what I wanted to do is write something where I loop through the files, I organize them by their study instance UID, and then I try to send them and try to catch any errors and resend if I can try it a different way. So let me show you my solution. I did introduce something new in my solution, which I'll explain. So I added another library called system.collections, and this allows us to use an array list. So if you look in my solution, first I create an object, which is an array list. Then I go find that monitor path, look for any DCM files. For each DICOM file I find, I'm going to try to get the study instance UID. Right? So I'm going to read in that study instance UID for each file. Then, after I get each study instance UID, once I get a study instance UID, then I'm going to create a new directory with that UID name. So in other words, in my monitor path, now if I didn't already have a folder for that UID, it's going to create that folder for the UID. And then once the folder is there, it's able to move that file from the input path to the folder within the input path for that study. So what should happen is all of these studies let me go back over here, all of these studies will end up being in their own study folders. And then once that's done, not only that, right? So here's the next piece of the secret sauce. I'm also adding to this array list. So this array list is basically, it's a list of UIDs, right? So I'm basically building a list of all the UIDs that I found. That way, when I get down here, I can loop through each UID that I found, and I can try to send everything in that folder. And what I basically did, using the same structure that we looked at before, where I called store SCU for my previous example, I just copy and pasted it. But this time, if the result is not 0, right? If the result is more than 0, meaning there's an error code, then I try to send it with the -xs command, and if that fails, I try to send it with -xv. So I try all the different iterations. And if none of that works, I just say I can't send the study, and I do nothing. If it does send the study, it sets a variable called success to true, which you can see here. So it's going to set the variable for success to true. And then if that's true, then we're going to delete that folder. So that way we don't have those files left behind. However, I could also not delete those, right? So I'm going to comment this so it doesn't delete it. That way we can see those files left behind after it's done. So I mean, the only real new thing here is I use system.collections because that's how I chose to do it. However, if you didn't know about system.collections, you didn't know that you could just use an array or a hash table to store it. Well, I didn't talk about hash tables, but it's very similar to an array. It's like a multi-dimensional array. But if you didn't know that you could use that, then instead you could have just checked, done another loop down here, looping through all the directories, and for each directory, try to send everything in that directory. You certainly could have done it that way as well. Could have done it either way. I just chose to do it this way. But, as anything else with all the scripting stuff, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Everybody comes up with their own solution to these problems. So assuming I wrote this the right way, and by the way, I'm going to put this solution file, I'm going to leave this solution file with James so you'll be able to grab it from him in case you want to see it. But, and I'll scroll through here in case you want to just try typing this from the video. Most of this is the same. This is all from the Ultra DICOM stuff. I did add right here a constant for the IP address and the port number. That way, if you wanted to try a different IP and port, you would be able to just set it here instead. And then I also down here, I use the array list instead of looping through directories. So let me leave this up. So if you want to pause the video, you can do this block, which is basically looping through all of the UIDs. I'm sorry, looping through all of the DICOM files and moving the DICOM files into the right folders and building that array. And then when you're done with that block, this is the next block, which is, by the way, this just outputs the number of studies that it found. That's kind of optional. And then you have a for loop here, which is looping through each item in that array. So each one of those UIDs. So this is the code. I'll leave this on the screen for a second, and you can pause if you want to type this in. And if you're done, you can certainly finish it out by typing these last few lines down here at the bottom. You might need to pause to do that. So if you're done, let's give this a try. So I'm going to start the workflow service. Here's what we should see. Over here, we should see a whole bunch of log lines telling us it found files, moving those files into folders, and then using the SCU command to try to send them to store SCP. And then over here, this is going to be, well, let me go back to files in. We should see these files disappear and be reorganized into those folders by the study UID, and we should see them all get sent over to DCM, store SCP. So we'll see them all appear over here as store SCP is receiving those files. Let me bring up the command over here. So just to kind of start this from scratch, I'll let this command line run, and we'll kind of watch all of this happen in real time. So let's start this. So we should see lots of activity. I'll leave this behind, and we can always go analyze this later, but we'll see it in the background. Oops. And there's all the files that got received by store SCP. You can see they're all over here. You can see we have our two folders, right? So it reorganized everything. And then over here you see the log, which tells us what it did. So you can see each time over here as it processed each one of those 30 files. When it was done with the 30 files, it tells us that it found 2 studies. It's trying to route the first one, and you'll notice here I put in the output of the SCP command, so you can see our SCU command, so you can see what it's trying to do, right? And then you can see it finally works here, right? It fails here with ILE, and it fails with it failed with JPEG 2000, and then it tried J2K, and that worked. It got a 0, and then I output here this deleting the file, but I commented that line so we wouldn't lose the file structure over here, so you can see what it looked like when it's done. But that's it. So in the next video, I am going to show you how to do database transactions using Ultra Workflow. So we're going to look at doing some database stuff, and then we'll try to tie it all together in a final video.